Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. It was a quiet Thursday evening, and the sun had just dipped behind the hills that framed our little town. I had just turned off the stove. Dinner was done, the house was still, and my husband, Mark, had called earlier to say he'd be working late again. I didn't think much of it. These late nights had become more frequent lately, and though I missed him, I'd gotten used to the hush that came with dusk. The golden hour painted everything in amber. The kitchen window glowed softly, the light catching on the rim of my wine glass. I sat down with a small sigh, relishing the silence. Then, just as I brought the glass to my lips, a knock came at the door. Not loud, not urgent, just 3 slow taps that somehow carried a weight I couldn't explain. I didn't expect anyone. Opening the door, I saw Daniel. Daniel, Mark's friend from college. He was the kind of man who never lost his thoughtful gaze, the kind that seemed to read between lines, even in silence. We hadn't seen him in months, maybe even a year. He looked older, more tired than I remembered, with his hair just starting to gray at the temples and a small crease between his brows. But he smiled, gently, almost apologetically. "Evening, Claire," he said, his voice quiet like the wind that rustled the tree out front. "I hope this isn't a bad time." I shook my head before I even realized I was doing it. "No, not at all. Come in, please." He stepped inside, his jacket damp from the early evening air, and the moment felt oddly suspended, like we both understood something had changed, though we hadn't yet named it. I led him to the living room, and he sat with the same carefulness I remembered, always a guest, always aware of space. "I was just having some wine," I said. "Would you like a glass?" He nodded. "That would be nice." In the kitchen, I tried to piece together the why of his visit. Mark never mentioned seeing him recently. Daniel lived 2 towns over, and the last I heard, he was working in some government office, quiet and steady. What brought him here, unannounced, at dusk? I returned with 2 glasses, and we clinked without ceremony. He sipped, his eyes on the glass, not me. "I didn't know Mark was working late," he said finally. "Neither did I." He called around 5. There was a small beat of silence. "I was in the area," he said. "Thought I'd stop by." That wasn't the truth. I could hear it in the way he said it. He wasn't good at lying, never was. I didn't push. Instead, I let the room speak. The clock ticked faintly. The wine breathed in the air, and outside, crickets had begun to sing. The moment felt strangely private. "You've been all right?" I asked, filling the quiet. He hesitated. "Some days better than others." I nodded slowly. "I know how that is." And then he looked at me, really looked at me, the way you do when you're deciding whether or not to say the thing that's been weighing on your chest. His eyes were tired but earnest. "Claire," he said gently, "I didn't come to see Mark." I held my breath. "I came to see you." The words landed with the softest thud, like a stone dropped in water. Not loud, but rippling all the same. My mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. He set his glass down on the coffee table and leaned forward, elbows resting on his knees. He didn't reach for me. He didn't move closer. But his voice, low, trembling just a little, carried more than any gesture could. "I've carried something for a long time. I never said anything because it didn't feel right. I watched you and Mark build this life, this home. You've always been kind to me. Too kind. And I told myself it was nothing. But it wasn't." He looked down, then back up. "I've loved you. I think I still do." It wasn't a dramatic moment. He didn't cry. I didn't gasp. It just settled. The room seemed to shrink, like the walls had drawn closer to hear it. I sat very still, the weight of his confession folding into my skin. We were in our 50s. This wasn't a high school crush, and it wasn't about desire. It was deeper, messier, real. And suddenly I realized I didn't feel angry or shocked. I felt seen. And that scared me, because I'd spent the last few years fading into the background of my own life, supporting Mark, keeping the home running, smiling when I needed to. But something in Daniel's voice pulled at a thread I tucked away a long time ago. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. We sat like that for a long while, brave in his stillness, me unraveling quietly. Eventually, I whispered, "You shouldn't have come." "I know," he said. But he didn't leave. And I didn't ask him to. We didn't speak for the next few minutes. He looked out the window, and I looked at him, studying the lines in his face, the sadness behind his eyes. It wasn't lust. It was longing, something deeper, a confession years in the making. And I realized I wasn't just stunned by what he said. I was stunned by what had awakened in me. Something I thought I'd buried, my own longing, for connection, for being more than just someone's wife, someone's routine. I was Claire, and I had feelings I hadn't looked at in a long, long time. The light outside had faded to blue. The lamps cast shadows that danced slowly across the walls. I stood up, pacing gently near the fireplace, trying to sort through the thrum in my chest. "Why now?" I asked, not angry, just confused. Daniel leaned back. Because I couldn't carry it anymore. Because if I left it unsaid, I'd regret forever. I believed him. And I realized that part of me didn't want to go back to pretending I didn't feel. Lonely? Not that Mark was cruel. He wasn't. But life had become motions, and Daniel's words cracked open something that had long gone quiet inside me. He stood, sensing maybe it was time to go. I didn't stop him. He walked to the door slowly, then turned. "I won't come back unless you ask me to." I nodded. "Okay." Then he stepped outside into the cool evening air, the door closing gently behind him. And I stood alone in the living room, holding a glass of wine that had long since gone warm, listening to the sound of my own breath. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew something had already changed. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The days that followed blurred like watercolors in the rain, soft around the edges, hard to make sense of. I went about my routine, folding laundry, watering the garden, chatting with neighbors at the mailbox. But I wasn't fully in any of it. Daniel's words echoed in the corners of my mind, creeping in during the quiet moments. "I loved you. I think I still do." He hadn't asked for anything. He hadn't made a move. He just told the truth. And somehow that made it more powerful. Mark remained unaware. He was wrapped in meetings, late nights, business trips that kept stretching a little longer. He would kiss me on the cheek and mutter about deadlines, then disappear into the hum of his work life. I didn't blame him. It was our rhythm. But now it felt like background music I'd been dancing to without hearing the lyrics. 3 days after Daniel's visit, I found myself driving. No destination, just the road. I ended up at the edge of town where the hills curved into a lookout. From there, the rooftops of homes dotted the land like a patchwork quilt, and the sky stretched so wide it felt like it could swallow every unspoken word in my chest. I sat there for nearly an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just breathed. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt like I was fully present in my own skin. Daniel's visit had stirred more than just memories. It stirred questions about myself, my marriage, my own heart. Later that night, I opened an old photo album. Mark and I in our 20s, smiling with the sun in our eyes. Then our first home. Then birthdays, vacations. All the expected chapters of a shared life. And tucked in one photo, nearly forgotten, was Daniel. He was standing just behind Mark at our anniversary party 10 years ago. He had a drink in hand and a distant smile. Back then, I never noticed the way he looked at me. But now, with everything he'd said, I wondered how long he had been hiding it. I didn't sleep much that night. By morning, I had made a decision, not out of obligation, but curiosity. I texted him, just a simple line. If you meant what you said, meet me at the lookout at 7. His reply came within a minute. I'll be there. The sun was just beginning to dip again, casting long shadows over the hills as I parked. He was already there, leaning against the railing, looking out over the town. The breeze played with the collar of his shirt. He looked calm, but the kind of calm you wear like armor. When he turned and saw me, he didn't smile. He just nodded once. Respectful. Patient. I walked up beside him. Close, but not too close. I don't know what this is, I said quietly. I'm not here to start something messy. I understand, he said. But you caught me off guard, and I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. He turned to me then, not invading my space, but grounding me with his presence. I never expected you to say anything back, he said. I just needed to be honest with you. After all these years, I wanted you to know what you meant to me, even if it changes nothing. I swallowed hard. The wind tugged at my hair, and for a moment I wanted to reach out and hold on to something, anything that felt steady. But it does change something, I said. I've been invisible for a long time. Not because Mark did anything wrong. Just, life wore us down. You reminded me that I am still here, that I matter. His eyes softened. You've always mattered, Claire. I just didn't know if it was ever my place to say so. A pause. Then I asked the question that had been waiting in my throat for days. Why me? He took a deep breath. Because you see people. You really see them. You remember small things. You care deeply, even when no one notices. And you laugh with your whole face. That kind of light stays with a man, even if he pretends it doesn't. I didn't know whether to be flattered or frightened. I can't betray Mark, I said, the words trembling as they left me. I know, he said again, and I'm not asking you to. I looked away, down at my hands. They were folded so tightly they'd gone pale at the knuckles. I'm just saying, he continued, you don't have to keep pretending you don't have needs of your own. The honesty in his voice felt like a balm and a wound, both at once. He stepped back then, giving me space. I'll go, he said. I won't reach out again, but I want you to know you're not alone, and you never have been. If you ever need a friend or someone who sees you, truly sees you, you know where to find me. And then he turned slowly and walked away. No drama, no pleading, just quiet grace. I stayed there long after he was gone. And when I finally drove home, the sky had shifted to night, stars just beginning to bloom above. Mark was already asleep when I got in. The house was dark, humming softly with the life we built. I sat at the kitchen table, fingertips tracing the rim of my glass. My heart was full, but not in the way I expected. Not with desire or confusion, but with awareness of myself, of what I wanted, of what I had, and what I still needed to explore. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this story wasn't over. The next few weeks unfolded like a quiet storm, not loud, not obvious, but steady in its effect. Nothing had happened on the outside. Not really. Mark continued with work, and I continued to fill my days with errands, chores, and the polite conversations that come with long marriages and quiet neighborhoods. But inside, something was shifting. I was changing. There were mornings when I woke up before Mark, lying there in the stillness, staring at the ceiling, wondering what it would feel like to be truly seen again. Not just noticed in passing, but understood. Wanted, yes, but also valued, not for what I did or provided, but simply for who I was. That thought alone brought a soft ache to my chest. I didn't reach out to Daniel again. But I thought about him, not with guilt, just curiosity, reflection, sometimes longing. One afternoon, I was folding laundry in the living room, and Mark came home early. A small surprise. He kissed the top of my head and said, "How was your day?" It was a normal question. He always asked, and I always gave the same answer. Good, productive. But that day, I paused. Something about the way he asked felt habitual. Like muscle memory. His eyes were already on his phone before I answered. I looked at him then, not with resentment, but with a strange sadness. We had built so much together. A home, a life, a history. But somewhere along the way, the color had faded. We were comfortable, yes, safe, predictable. But was that enough? Was it enough for the rest of my life? That evening, I sat in the bathtub long after the water went cold. I watched the ripples settle every time I moved my hand and wondered how long I had been drifting on autopilot. It wasn't Mark's fault, and it wasn't mine either. But the distance between us was real and growing. 2 days later, I ran into Daniel at the farmer's market. It wasn't planned. I was examining a bushel of late summer tomatoes, and suddenly there he was, standing across from me at the honey stall. He saw me at the same moment I saw him. And for a second, we just looked at each other, neither of us moving. Then he smiled, soft and respectful. "Claire," he said. "Daniel." I hadn't spoken his name since that night on the hill. He stepped closer, but not too close. His presence was still gentle. He held a paper bag in one hand and wore that same unassuming jacket that made him blend in, even though he never quite did. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said. "I come every other Saturday, for the tomatoes." He chuckled, and I realized I had missed the sound of someone laughing not out of politeness, but because they truly meant it. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by the sounds of chatter, birds overhead, the rustle of produce being picked over. It was strange how normal it all felt, like we were two old friends catching up. Like nothing had ever been confessed. But of course, everything had. "I've been thinking," I said finally, unsure of what would follow that sentence. He waited. "About the things you said. About how I've been seen." I didn't know how much I needed to hear that. He nodded slowly, not rushing me. "I haven't stopped thinking about it either," he said. "But I've kept my distance, like I promised." I looked down at the tomatoes in my hand. "I didn't come here to start anything, Daniel." "I know." I think I needed to know that moment was real, that it wasn't just a fantasy I imagined during a quiet evening. It was real, he said, voice steady. Every word. A beat passed between us, unspoken but thick with understanding. I'd lived a life built around others, I said. Mark, the kids, the house. Everything. And I don't regret that. But somewhere along the way, I stopped building anything for myself. Daniel didn't interrupt. He let me speak, and that alone made something loosen in my chest. I don't want an affair, I continued. I'm not looking to destroy what I have. I don't want to destroy anything either, he said gently. All I want is for you to remember who you are, what you deserve, even if I never see you again. That struck something in me, because he meant it. It wasn't a seduction. It was an offering. We parted without touching. No hug. No secret glances. Just a quiet moment of two people who understood each other in a way that didn't need labels. That night I lay in bed next to Mark, listening to the rhythm of his breathing. The familiar rise and fall of the man I had shared so many years with. I remembered the early days when his touch thrilled me, when we would talk until sunrise and believe we could fix the world. I missed that man. I missed the woman I used to be with him. I didn't feel angry. I didn't even feel betrayed by life's slow fading of passion. But I did feel something I hadn't expected, permission. Not from Daniel, but from myself. The permission to ask for more. Not just from my husband, but from my own life. The next morning, I made breakfast and poured 2 cups of coffee. Mark came down the stairs, as he always did, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, checking his phone. I was thinking, I said, handing him his cup. We haven't had a real conversation in a while. He looked up, surprised. What do you mean? I mean, a real one. About us. About how we're doing. How we're feeling. I think we've been walking past each other for years. He set the phone down slowly. Are you unhappy? I hesitated, then answered, I think I'm waking up. He stared at me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something in his eyes. Uncertainty, maybe even fear, but also attention. I want us to find each other again, I said. But I need you to meet me halfway. Mark didn't speak for a while. He sipped his coffee. Then he nodded. Okay, let's talk. And just like that, a door opened, not wide, but enough to let light in. I didn't know where this would lead. To healing, to change, to something new. But I had stopped drifting. And somewhere, even in the quiet corners of myself, I could feel the start of a return. Not to the woman I once was, but to the woman I was meant to be. Don't forget to like the video, share your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to stay updated with our latest stories. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Talking with Mark that morning had opened something between us, raw, honest, necessary, but repairing what time had gently worn down was not as simple as a single conversation over coffee. We didn't suddenly become passionate again. There were no movie-style makeups or spontaneous weekends away, but we started seeing each other again. Not just being in the same house, but really seeing. We began small, sitting together in the evenings without the television on, taking walks after dinner like we used to in our 30s. Some nights we talked. Other nights we didn't say much at all. But there was a quiet tenderness in the effort we both made. One night, as we stood brushing our teeth side by side, I glanced at Mark's reflection. His hair had more gray now than it used to. His shoulders hunched a bit when he stood still. He wasn't the man I married. and neither was I the woman he married. We had changed, grown older, weathered, quieter. But for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel invisible next to him. He was trying, and I was trying too. Still, I couldn't deny that Daniel's presence had left an imprint. It wasn't about him, not really. It was about what his words had awakened, how they reminded me that I was still capable of stirring someone, of being stirred. It wasn't romantic fantasy. It was deeper than that. It was the realization that I still mattered as a woman, not just a wife. One morning, I wrote Daniel a letter. Not to send it, just to write. I told him thank you for seeing me, for saying what no one else had said in years, for giving me a mirror when I didn't know I needed one. And then I folded the letter, tucked it into the back of my journal, and left it there. The final chapter of this story wasn't about choosing between two men. It was about choosing myself, about remembering that the person I am outside of my roles still deserves attention, affection, discovery. One Saturday, Mark surprised me. He came home from the store with a bouquet of sunflowers, my favorite, though I hadn't mentioned that detail in over a decade. He handed them to me with a soft smile and said, "I saw them and thought of you." I held the flowers, and for a moment I felt tears catch behind my eyes. Not because of the gesture itself, but because he'd remembered, because he was trying to meet me in this new space we were building. That night, we sat on the porch. No phones, no distractions, just the sound of cicadas and the warm hush of summer dusk. He turned to me and said, "I've missed you, Claire. I didn't realize how far apart we'd gotten until you brought it up. I'm glad you did." I reached for his hand and held it in mine. "I missed us too," I said. And in that moment, it wasn't about the past, or regrets, or what could have been. It was about presence, about being here, together, trying. Some days were better than others. Some days we slipped into old habits, but the difference now was awareness, intention, a quiet understanding that love, real love, wasn't just about passion. It was about choosing each other over and over, even when the years blur the edges. I still think about Daniel from time to time, not with longing, but with gratitude. He entered my life at dusk. He brought with him truth, not to destroy, but to awaken. And because of him, I found my way back, not to the past, but to myself, to the woman who had been quietly waiting beneath the surface, and to the life she still had time to shape on her own terms.